I'm Doug Johnson, and this is The Business of Life Strategies for Success. Each show, we highlight a local personality who has some success strategies, that's hard to say, success strategies, that they'll share with us. They tell us their life story, and we try to have a good time. So join us today as we welcome Marvin Montgomery. Marvin, what a pleasure to have you here.
It's my pleasure, Doug.
You and I go way back, and recently we reconnected and found out that it's just like we never left off.
Absolutely.
So you are called the sales doctor.
Yes.
And obviously sales is a business term, but also so applicable to everyday life. So what is your backstory, Marvin, and how did you become the sales doctor?
Well, you know, my background originally started with a company called J.B. Robinson Jewelers, locally right here in Cleveland.
Okay.
And Larry Robinson, the owner, gave me an opportunity to really start at the bottom of that company and end up being the train director, you know, for the 95, 96 locations we had around the country. Mm-hmm. And then in 1986, going in 1987, the company was bought by K Jewelers. And then I had a decision to make, Doug.
Okay.
Do I stay with Larry because he was going to start a consulting company after that, or do I go with K Jewelers, who had made me an offer to come and join them and continue on with that train director position? So I pondered and I pondered, went back and forth. I decided to go with Larry Robinson because he's always been a winner.
Right.
So I said, I'm going to stay with this guy.
Sure.
So in 1980, and from 87, 88 to 1990, I worked with with Larry Robinson, what was called the Robinson Group, a consulting firm. Okay. That's where I honed my skills from training, you know, to consulting with those 2 years with him. And then in 1990, he walked to my office one day. I remember it just like it was yesterday. And he said, you know, Marvin, I'm going to go back in the jewelry business again. My non-compete is up. And I went, what the heck do you want to do that for?
Right.
Who wants to go back to those hours and that stress? Because we're
Yep.
look, I was having fun for those 2 years, Doug. Mm-hmm. And we had a nice client base already in those 2 years' time. I was having fun. And now I had another decision to make. Do I go back in the jewelry business again with Larry, who's always been a winner? Yep. Or do I go on my own? And again, back and forth, and I made the decision to go on my own. So in 1990, January 1st, I started my own company, and I called it Marvin Montgomery. I made it simple.
Okay. It works.
It works. It works. Somebody told me, Marvin, you're not going to do anything that's going to destroy your name. You're going to be of the highest integrity, so use your name. So January 1st, 1990, I started doing the sales training and consulting and coaching for myself, and Larry Robinson and I made an equitable agreement on how we're going to move forward with the company. Yeah.
Super.
Yeah.
So you do sales training, okay,
but sales training that teaches people how to become a trusted advisor.
Ah, okay.
There's sales training, and then there's sales training to that next level. Because if I said to you right now, what's the first thing that comes to mind when I say salesperson? Is it something positive or is it something negative?
You know, it's the old axiom about the used car salesperson.
Yes, there's
right.
a stigma there, Doug.
There sure is.
So I talk about you only have seconds to reverse that negative stigma like you have about salespeople. So you can't just be a salesperson. You have to move from a salesperson to what I train people to become as a trusted advisor. So how do you build those tools? How do you use those tools that's going to help you build that know, like, and trust? Because you know people buy from people who they know, like, and trust.
Well, and that's instant credibility,
yes.
Really.
Yes. And the nice thing about this is, and I talk about this all the time, Doug, when you use that trusted advisor approach, and not the salesy approach, you may never buy anything from me, but I establish a relationship strong enough that you'll refer me to somebody else, or maybe even use me later down the road.
And that always works, I think.
Yes.
So tell us about how to become a trusted advisor.
Well, the way to become a trusted advisor is in those first couple seconds where you don't do what I call an information dump, a show up and throw up, a memorized scripted presentation. Because what happens is We all have what's called spare thinking time. And you're using it right now because I'm talking.
Okay.
Spare thinking time means that you can think faster than what I'm talking. Actually, 3 to 5 times faster than what I'm talking. So if I don't take time at certain intervals to engage you, that time becomes time to drift off, time to zone out, time to start thinking, how in the heck do I get out of this conversation with this guy? Because I can't get a word in edgewise.
Right. Yeah.
So in order to help with that spare thinking time, I have to engage you as quickly as possible. There's only one way to do that. In carpentry, they call it measure twice, cut once.
Okay.
In selling, become a trusted advisor, it's called asking questions and actively listening. So I need to start off either by actively listening or asking questions. I'm doing a combination of both until I find out exactly what your needs are and what your concerns are, what your issues are. Or I may find out there's nothing wrong right now. It's like going to the dentist. It's nice to go to the dentist sometime and he goes, you know what, we did an exam and everything's fine. All we have to do today is your teeth cleaned. You go, oh, this is great.
Yeah, really, it would be.
Wasn't it great, Doug?
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing with this person that you're sitting across from. Sometime you have to say to them, you know what, based on this conversation, and by the way, thanks for meeting with me today, but it looks like right now you're good with what you're currently using. But the salesy approach is, it's almost like, well, you have to buy from me because
Right. I'm on commission.
I'm on commission, and well, I'll tell you help me out here.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's actually you're forcing this person opposed to asking this person.
Well, and the respect that garners, if you're honest with them and say, geez, you don't need my services today, I think that catches a lot of people off guard and they go, whoa, really?
Yeah.
And, so that builds respect
That's right.
for that salesperson. The idea, again, what you're talking about is so useful in everyday life.
Yeah.
Because we're always selling something.
Yes.
Right?
And I always talk about nothing happens until somebody sells something. And the same techniques that I train and coach people on, I remind them those are the same techniques that you should be using to communicate with anybody. This is just life communication. I want everybody I encounter to know me, like me, and trust me. Not just the person I'm talking to hopefully purchase my product or service. I think the other thing that helps is I try to get people to change their mindset, Doug.
Okay.
There's a misnomer that they use. It's called prospect. And they want to look at everybody as a prospect. Well, they don't start off as a prospect. They actually start off as a suspect. And I got that from the old detective movies. Have you ever watched one of those detective shows?
Oh, sure.
And what do they say, Doug? They say, round up all the usual what?
Suspects.
And bring them in for questioning.
Well, questioning.
Yeah.
Sure.
They don't say, bring them in and put them in. No, they said, bring them in for questioning.
And we'll question them. Yeah.
And then you're going to find out if they're guilty or not guilty. Or they might say, we're going to let you go, but don't leave town. Okay?
Right.
Or they might say, hey, look, we're going to have to hold you. But the answers you give me will let me know what to do with you. Right?
Right.
Because I'm not doing anything but what? Asking and listening.
Questions, yeah.
Asking and listening.
Yeah.
It's the same approach. And I get people to say, you get too excited. You go, I got a prospect. You don't have a prospect meeting. You got a suspect meeting. The answers they give you will determine if they remain a suspect or turn into a prospect, then hopefully turn into a customer relationship. Now, you still want that suspect, though, to become a what? Trusted advisor.
Right.
Someone that will refer you, some that may want to come back to you, or somebody may just want to say what a great meeting I had with this gentleman. Didn't buy from him, but what a great guy. Because companies don't make sales, people do. It's a people business.
Right.
Yeah. So that's it's getting them to change their mindset, and then how to change your mindset is through that asking questions and actively listening. That's the approach.
Well,
pretty simple.
And the listening, is such an important part about that, because you can answer the questions, and I can ask the questions, but if I'm not listening to you,
if you're not listening to the response, because there's an expression: people seldom tell you everything the first time you ask them. Give an example. If I start coughing right now and you said, Marvin, what's the matter? Oh, nothing, I'm okay. That's not telling you anything. You know, you're going to go, what do you mean you're okay? Because, all right, do I need to? You're going to keep asking me,
Right.
okay, until you find out what's going on, okay? So I didn't say I ate this. I wasn't specific on what I said, but I just gave you a general response. So with that general response, you're going to drill down on that with questions and listening with questions. And then once you figured you got all the information you need, then you talk. Okay, like a doctor. Doctor does the same thing.
Right.
They do all those tests. They do all those questions. Then they let you know what the next step is going to be. So, but we put the cart before the horse. We want to do that presentation because we're taught. Most companies are teaching their people to present rather than assess, rather than evaluate, rather than discover, rather than qualify. Analyze what's going on here first, because you may find out you can save yourself a lot of time. I always say that a lot of pipelines are filled with suspects and not prospects. They're putting quotes and proposals instead of solutions. Yeah. See, if you're putting a solution together, it's a prospect. You put a quote or proposal together, you probably did it for a suspect.
So, and what am I really looking for? I'm looking for the solution.
I'm looking. You want to be a solution provider,
right?
And that's another benefit that comes from that asking and listening, because now I'm providing a solution, and sometimes solution is not now. Yep, just like going to the dentist. The solution is you're okay. Well, that's great.
Yep.
And you walk out happy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Or if they found something, you're going to walk out happy too, knowing that they found it. Okay. So it's all about the questions, and then you're right, because some people will ask questions, but don't listen to the answers, or listen, but don't ask the follow-up question.
Okay.
You got to. You can't. I heard what you said. One of the biggest examples is the customer says, "Boy, your price is kind of high, Doug." Now, if I'm listening to the answer, if I'm really listening, I know that you haven't given me enough information to talk yet, which means I got to come back with another question. Remember, people seldom identify all their needs directly. So you just made a general statement. Boy, your price is kind of high. Well, I got to find out why you feel that way. So I'm going to ask you, boy, Doug, I'm surprised to hear you say that. How come you feel the price is too high? I got to ask you.
Right, right.
Yeah, I don't want to assume. I need to know. Same thing when they say, let me think about it. Well, I need to find out exactly how come you're not ready to move forward. So I'm going to what? I'm going to ask you. Why can I ask you? Because we've already built a what?
Relationship.
We're just sitting here talking.
Yeah.
Boy, you got to be kidding me, Doug. I thought you might be ready to move forward right now. What's holding you back? I mean, I can make it very conversational.
Right.
And people relate asking to caring. When I'm asking you, I'm asking for it because you care, because I care. You've heard that expression, people can care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, don't go in there doing information dump. They don't care how much I know. They want to know if I really care. I have seconds to change that perception I already have of you. I already know what you're coming in. I know you. I've had a lot of you.
One of the things too, and you talked about the initial impression. Yeah. So for instance, if I'm trying to sell you something and we set up a meeting and I'm so busy working with my papers and so on and so forth that I don't look you in the eye and start making that connection, that relationship, then you're never going to buy anything from me.
That's right. And part of active listening is the visual, is the eye contact, is nodding the head like you're doing right now, is leaning forward. In other words, physically showing. See, remember I said this works at home?
Right.
If your significant other is talking to you and you're not doing this and giving eye contact, you know what they're going to say? Oh, you don't care about what I'm saying, do you? Now, you didn't say you didn't care.
Right.
But you showed you didn't care.
Yep, exactly.
You got to show them also that you care. Visually. Absolutely, Doug. Absolutely.
So Marvin, how did you get to be so smart with all of this? Obviously you know what you're talking about, and you had a great business background, but I'm sure that this started years before when you were a child.
Well, it's funny. We just got through with Mother's Day weekend, and one of the things I said to my mom when I visited her yesterday, I said, Mom, I just got to thank you again. She says, thank me for what? I said, remember you had me, my brother and I go to all these plays. Anytime anybody had a speech, time we wanted to talk, anything around communication at church or school, you would always volunteer us. And my brother and I, we'd go kicking and screaming. But I'll tell you what, Mom, I want to thank you because I'm able to do what I'm doing here today because of all the different things you got us involved in early on. You know, the plays, the speeches, the opportunity the situations that she put us in that gave us an opportunity to get out there and practice our practice what I didn't know I was going to be doing for a living.
Right.
20 years from then. Yeah.
Well, and in your books, and yes, I still have a copy of your book from years ago, you talk about practice making perfect. So talk with us about that, if you will.
Well, I've actually moved that a little further since that book, Doug. I talk about the 5 Ps.
Okay.
Preparation and practice provides peak performance. Preparation and practice provides peak performance. Any coach will tell you the way you practice is the way you play. If you want to get better at anything, it requires practice. The problem in sales is there's no degree that you have to go out and get. So I really stress the importance of why would you practice how to overcome the price objection? Why would you not practice that first? Why would you practice on your customer? Why would you not practice that needs analysis? Because if you don't know what questions to ask and you have not practiced them and practice what to listen for and how to drill down on those questions, you'll still get out in front of that situation and wing it. Okay? I learned through some research. The research shared that it takes 13 times of practice to learn something new. So if you gave me something new, a name, a phone number, something, if I practice it up to anywhere between 1 to 13 times, I could retain it. How many times of practice you think it takes to change a behavior?
Oh, probably more than that.
Yeah. The research shows anywhere between 1 to 113 times to change behavior. One of the behaviors that I talk to salespeople about is how they ask for permission. Because when we grow up, we're taught to ask for permission. So when they're trying to book the appointment, they'll say, would you like to meet? Or is it okay if we meet? Okay. Now I'm asking you for permission, which means I took what I want to do, gave it to you, and now I got to sit back and wait for you to what?
To respond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Opposed to saying, let's meet. Get your calendar out, Doug. Let's see what Tuesday looks for you. Mm-hmm. So I try to get people to stay away from those permission-based requests that put that customer in a situation for them. Now I've got to decide. And if you're working with someone that's indecisive, you're going to end up with postponement.
Good thought, yeah.
So, but that's a tough behavior because we were taught, hey, okay, what are you doing? Now, how are you supposed to ask?
Yep.
I mean, that's drilled into us. Mm-hmm. As long as you're at home.
Right.
Even when you go back home, they go, what are you doing? You're not, you too big to ask?
Yeah, right, for sure. Right. Yeah.
So I talk about if you want to change behaviors or learn something new, the best way to do it is through practice. Or you can practice on your customer. That's one of the things I start off with sometimes. I'll go, hey, are you practicing on your customer? Or are you using preparation and practice? That's going to provide you with peak performance. I want to be at my peak. Mm-hmm. So now when they look at me and say, is this the best price? I come back immediately and go, oh, absolutely. But if you don't practice these responses,
right,
then you do what comes naturally. And sometimes what comes naturally to people is they panic. And panic is an emotion. And once you get emotional, that means you speak before you think. In other words, whatever comes, that first initial thought comes right out your mouth. So we have to think before we speak and think before you act. And one way to do that is through practice. They had the movie out last year on Sully. And Captain Sully said, hey, look, I'm no hero. He said, we would practice simulation after simulation after simulation on what to do if, in fact, the engines would fail. So when the engines failed, I immediately knew what to do. I didn't lean over my co-pilot and go, the engines just failed.
Right.
What should we do?
Yep.
The customer
and
wants
we're in the soup now. Yeah.
Right. The customer wants a discount. What should I do? The customer said they want to think about it. What should I do?
Yeah. Oh, geez.
Just a little practice.
Yeah.
Until you get it right. And you said to me early on, how do I get to where I'm at? Through practice. I tell people all the time, I got my MBA from J.B. Robinson Jewelers. Larry called it role playing. I just moved that word from role playing to practicing, because I want people to understand how the importance of practice. Because you practice this, you practice that. Well, why not practice that communication? You want to get good at anything.
Right.
You spent some time practicing.
Practicing. Yeah.
That's how we get good.
Yeah.
That's how we stay at our peak.
Marvin, one of the quick things I want to talk about, you and I talked about the fact that competitors should work together as opposed to considering the competitor the enemy.
Yeah. I think that's one of the dumbest mindsets out there, is that anybody that does the same thing that you do is the enemy, and you should be aware and be cautious. Well, when I first started my company, Hal Becker and I were members of COSI, and he said to me, Marvin, I understand you're starting your own company. Hey, come over, let's schedule a time for you to come over to my house. I want to help you any way I can. Went over to his house. He opened up anything, pricing, training materials, his approach, how he went and got new, you name it, it was an open book, so to speak. He does the same thing I do, okay? So there may be times when I referred things to him and he's referred opportunities to me. We don't look at each other as competition. You know, and I think that's the worst thing you can do is isolate yourself from the same people that do the same thing you do.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know you and Hal are good friends,
Oh,
and you're also working on projects together.
Yeah, and we do the COSI sales class together called the Sales Guys.
Oh, there you go.
And but yeah, it just befuddles me how people will not communicate and connect with the people that are doing the same thing that they do. Because if nothing else, you can not necessarily maybe be as close to Hal as I, but I could refer you if it's not going to be a good fit, and you refer me, and all of a sudden we're helping each other when the opportunity presents itself.
Normally, Marvin, we talk about 3 strategies for success, and I see we're running out of time, but I was going to say we have at least 5. I don't know if we have time to talk about all those, but let me choose a couple of these.
Sure.
That I think are really, really important. One is turn intent into action.
Yeah.
Avoid the I'm gonna syndrome.
Yeah. I came up with that a couple years ago when I had somebody say to me, you need to be more intentional with your intentions.
Okay.
And because what happens sometimes is we have good intentions. You intended to do this, you intended to do that, somebody's in the hospital, you intended to go see him, and by the end of the day you did nothing. So I've adopted what I call a do it now. And when I do it now, I don't have to worry about not acting on my intention. So if something comes up, first thing, it could be something as simple as a phone call. You know, ever have a fleeting moment where you go, oh, thinking about Marvin, I haven't talked to him in a while, I'm gonna give him a call. Well, call him.
Right.
Yeah, act on your intentions. Be more intentional with your intentions, because what I found is people really have good intentions, but they're not intentional with those intentions. So I try to act on it right then. And not postpone and not procrastinate.
I just love that.
Yeah.
Nothing at all happens until somebody sells something.
Yeah. Everything starts with a sale. And there's some industries that recently have realized that, because now I'm working with accounting firms, I'm working with law firms, I'm working with hospitals, I'm working with banking, I'm working with private schools in their admissions department. They now realize that they need to become that trusted advisor. They need to approach this situation in a way that that gets that person to know, like, and trust them. Everything's a sale. Everything starts with a sale. Hey, look, babies know that. You know, when babies start crying, they're selling for, they're crying for attention, but that's a sale. They're getting mom or dad to come run in that room. Yep.
Good point.
So nothing happens until somebody sells something. Yep.
Neat. Your outlook impacts your outcome.
Oh, I do a talk on the power of attitude. And one of the things that comes out of that, I remind people that whatever they see, it's like the self-fulfilling prophecy. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So if your outlook is positive, you're going to have a positive outcome. If your outlook is negative, you're going to have a negative outcome. Doctors have proved that all the time. They've done research where they had people, it's the same identical thing, but the person with the positive outlook had had a better outcome. The person with the negative outlook
Right.
had the negative
Outcome.
So I asked people, what's your outlook? Is it positive or negative? Because your outlook is going to affect your outcome. And it works in a sales call too. Do you go into this situation knowing you're going to get it, or are you in there playing, not to lose?
Marvin, I see that you have your, pardon me, Get Marvinized shirt on today.
Yeah.
Tell us about the story behind that.
Well, first of all, Doug, I wasn't smart enough to come up with that. Pretty smart, but not that smart. One of the first sessions I did in the 90s was with a company called Reserve Network, and Doug Stollert was the president then. And he elected to do the first sessions, the sessions we're going to do on a Saturday.
Okay.
The people were not happy about having to go Saturday morning from 8 to 10
I can imagine.
for training, okay? Especially in an industry that they weren't doing a lot of sales training. Well, at the end of the first session, like I do at all sessions, I always say, hey, can I get a couple people to share with me what your takeaway was from today? What do you want to go back and implement and execute? And the one lady says, hey, can I go first? I'm going, oh, here we go. And she says, you know what? I've been to a lot of training over the years, but I'll tell you what, I really feel like I've been Marvinized today. And I went, wow, I like that.
For sure.
I said, hold on, what do you mean by that? She says, well, some speakers and trainers have content, which means they have motivation, substance, or some have substance but no motivation. But you have both. You came this morning with substance and motivation, and I feel like I've been Marvinized. I said, well, thank you for that, and I'm going to be using that, by the way. And every time I say that, I'll give credit to you and the Reserve Network. So that's where it came from. Motivation and substance.
Neat story. So today, we've been Marvinized.
That's right, Doug.
So contact information at the end of the show.
Okay.
And hopefully lots of people give you a call. Marvin, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me, too. Thanks, Doug.
You bet. So one of the things that you didn't hear on Marvin's show was his story about Ryanair, an Icelandic airline, who in 2009 decided to start charging about $1.30 to use their restroom in flight. So Marvin was calling this pay to pee, right? Makes sense. We talk about going to the bathrooms, the bathrooms in the back of the plane. Ryanair had 3 in each plane that they were going to reduce to 1. The thought being that they could add 6 extra seats. Fortunately, it did not come to fruition. And to ensure down the road that United States flyers would not have this problem, Representative Dan Lipinski of Illinois in 2015 introduced an act to Congress that would prohibit the charging for the use of bathrooms. Pay to pee. Think about it. Good example of stupid people syndrome? Or what?